What's going on, everybody? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at the gaming and emulation performance of the all-new iPad M4. And I do want to mention that this is the 256GB version. So we've got a 9-core CPU and a 10-core GPU. With the 1TB version, I believe you get the 10-core CPU, and it does offer better performance. Got that extra core there. And originally, I wasn't even going to pick one of these up until I saw the performance that the M4 chip is putting out. And given the fact that Apple is now allowing emulators, I think as soon as we get some higher end stuff, this thing is going to be an awesome emulation tablet. In this video, I've got a lot to test. I want to do some gaming on the built-in screen. We're also going to connect this to a larger display just to see what we can do there. And I also want to compare some benchmarks against the Samsung Galaxy Tab S9, which is actually my favorite Android tablet. Well, tablet in general. I personally love the thing, had it since launch date. I don't have the Ultra version, but they are using the same exact chip, so we can get a good feel of which one is putting out better raw performance. And if you're not familiar with the new Apple M4 chip, what we've got here is a 9-core ARM SoC developed by Apple. We've got 3 performance cores, and on paper, it states that these can go up to 4.3 gigahertz. But I've seen some reports that it only boosts up to around 4 inside of the iPad. Either way, that's pretty crazy, 4 gigahertz in a mobile device. 6 efficiency cores, a 10-core GPU, and 8 gigs of RAM with this lower-end 256 gig model. But when you move up to the 1TB model, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg, but you do get a 10-core CPU and I think 16 gigs of RAM, so they double the RAM in that unit. The closest Android competitor to the iPad Pro is the Samsung Galaxy Tab S9. I've got the regular S9 here, and it's powered by a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. We've got 8 gigs of RAM, and I wanted to compare some benchmarks here. So the first thing we've got is Geekbench 6. On the Galaxy Tab S9 Ultra, we got a single core of 2068, multi 5644. I also ran this benchmark on the M4 iPad, and single core is the highest single core that I've ever seen out of an ARM chip. In fact, this is the highest single-core score that I've ever seen out of any CPU, be it x86, ARM, RISC, using Geekbench 6. This is pretty crazy. Single-core performance is actually beating the Intel i9 14900K, which is a pretty powerful gaming CPU. And considering the i9 does have more cores here, it is beating it in multi, but I thought it'd be by a lot more than this, because with that i9, it can actually pull up to 300 watts in my gaming PC. So obviously, M4 is beating out that Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. Let's move over to a GPU benchmark. Using 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme, on the Tab S9 Ultra, we got a total score of 3,889. Over on the iPad, it might be a bit hard to see, 9,049. And we got an average throughout that benchmark of 54 FPS on the Apple M4. And finally, I ran in Tutu, and this benchmark isn't tit for tat on iOS and Android, but either way, I wanted to show it off here. On the Tab S9 Ultra, we scored a 1,606,930. Over on the iPad M4, 2,580,937. And if you take a look down the list, yeah, it's definitely beating out that Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. And I'll tell you, Samsung has been ahead of the curve when it comes to their displays. We've got an AMOLED display here in that Tab S9 Ultra, but side by side, the new OLED display in the M4 iPad does look better to my eye, but that's really personal preference. Now I wanted to talk about pricing, because the iPad I have right here is the 11-inch 256 gig M4 model, coming in at $999. Definitely expensive for a tablet, but if we move over to the Galaxy Tab S9, you can see that the 256 gig model of that comes in at $919. Now it does come with an S Pen and 2 more gigs of RAM, 128 gigabytes of storage, 8 gigs of RAM. We still get that 11-inch display at $799. So the two closest configurations, the 256 S9 and the 256 M4, they're not that far off from each other when it comes to base price. In my opinion, both are still overpriced for what we're getting here, but I still wanted to give you a look at what we can do with this M4 iPad. And if you've been following any kind of iOS or iPad OS news, you know that Apple has been allowing emulators to hit the App Store, so we can actually download emulators now. And with the newer iPhones and newer iPads, we're actually getting some PC game ports like Death Stranding, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil Village, Assassin's Creed Mirage is coming next month, and I'd love to see more, because with this M4, we've actually got plenty of power and we can run these games very well. One that I've been playing a lot is Warframe. It's actually just the PC port of Warframe brought over to iOS, and on the M4, we're seeing some really great performance. We can jack all of those settings up to high. And one reason I've always really gone over to Android for my tablets is for emulation. And of course, right now we don't have those higher end emulators on iOS unless you do some jailbreaking or sideloading. But right now we can do up to PSP using PPSSPP from the App Store. And yeah, I cannot wait until we get more. For the last few years, we've actually had some really good controller support on the iPad and iPhone. I usually use an Xbox controller connected over Bluetooth, but if you wanted one of these telescopic controllers, they're pretty cheap. This is the D8. It's not the best controller in the world. It does have Hall-based analog sticks here, but the new iPad does fit inside of here, which is pretty impressive. So you can set this up like a handheld. And running something like Minecraft on the M4 iPad is going to work out great, but recently, even with the Android version, I've noticed some hitching here and there. This started about 3 months ago with a newer update, and it is on every mobile device that I test, so every once in a while you'll see it kind of stutter just a bit. Now I know for a fact that we've got more than enough power to run this game at full speed. We can do 120 Hz here, but unfortunately with those updates, we're getting that hitching. Next thing I wanted to show off was a little bit of Hades gameplay. Not a super hard game to run, and this is the Netflix version. Unfortunately, they're not going to be bringing this over to Android, but it does look amazing on this display. And you might notice I've got a frame counter up in the top right-hand corner. This is the Metal Hub. I've set this iPad up in developer mode. It doesn't work with every game, but if the game's using metal, you can usually see this. It'll give you some information about what's going on. And finally here in handheld mode, GTA, Vice City. Again, this is the Netflix version, but you can buy this from the App Store. It's the definitive edition, so it does look a lot better here than the older versions. And of course, if you just wanted to set this down with a Bluetooth controller connected, not a problem to do so. But I like gaming on a bigger screen, even when it comes to a mobile device. So I wanted to test out an external display with the M4 iPad. I've got a little Steam Deck dock here with USB Type-C to HDMI. We've also got some USB ports. Works great with these devices. And as soon as I get this plugged in, it'll come up full screen on my external display. And this is their Stage Manager for external display mode. You can also mirror the display, but we're going to get those black bars on the side. Now, unfortunately, with Stage Manager here, we really can't bring our games up into full screen mode. We can resize them on screen, and you're going to get much more real estate than you would on the built-in screen here. We could also utilize the built-in display, run a different app or a different game at the same time. We can send them back and forth pretty easily. So if I wanted that over on the big screen, not a problem to do so. And we can switch between apps pretty easily. But this is about as big as we can get that screen when it comes to gaming with Stage Manager. Really wish there was a full screen mode here. And there are some apps, when you're in mirror mode, we'll utilize that external display as a full screen display. Show you that in just a second. But ever since Stage Manager was brought over to external displays for these iPads, this is how I've been gaming. And I did mention you can mirror the display. So if we go into our settings, display, you can see it's got both of my screens listed. My external monitor. It'll also support HDR if you want to enable it. And we can swap between Stage Manager or mirrored display. So as soon as we mirror it, everything that happens on the built-in display is going to happen on the external display. And there are a few select apps that will utilize the full screen instead of giving us the black bars on the side. Real Racing 3 actually has a mode which will allow us to do that. But my favorite app to use here is actually Steam Link. So if I wanted to connect to my PC in the house, stream some games, just start playing. I've already got it all connected. You'll see that my external display goes completely full screen. We no longer have those black bars on the side. I'm connected to my gaming laptop right now. Xbox controller. We can go ahead and start streaming some PC games. And even though our screen on the iPad is black, it's actually working as a trackpad. I would love to see more developers implement something like this with their games and applications. I think it's really great that we can get that full screen over on that external. But even in mirror mode with apps that don't support that feature, we've still got a much larger screen we can game on. This is Call of Duty Mobile, still using that Xbox controller connected over Bluetooth. It just works right out of the box. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty great. I've got this maxed out right now as high as we can go. And it definitely looks like we're running over 60, if not at 120. Now, supposedly, from settings, we're at 120, and I kind of believe it is. It's just super smooth. But I understand that not a lot of people are going to be using an external monitor to kind of game on with the iPad. We'll probably use the built-in screen here. So one game that really gives us issues, even on higher-end Android devices, is Genshin Impact. And I will admit that the developers have spent more time over here. We've got full controller support. From settings, we'll go to graphics. I'm going to go to the highest settings we can go, and now we're going to take this up to 120 hertz. It's an option we just don't get in Android. And now, on the M4, we're running at the highest settings we can go with Genshin Impact, 120 FPS, and it works absolutely amazingly. I personally do like this new OLED display. This was one without that matte screen. You can do a few options with the new iPads and bring that price way up. I just went with the base 256, and I'm actually having a good time with this thing. And like I mentioned, we are getting some PC ports brought over to iOS and iPad OS. This is Resident Evil Village. We're at high settings, and unfortunately, starting up on this one, it didn't transfer my save from my old M2 iPad. And on that, I really had to take some of the settings down to medium. This one here, we're at high settings, and it looks great. I mean, it's pretty crazy playing a game like this on a mobile device.
There. It's like I said to your mom. That book's too scary for you.
And of course, I wanted to show off Warframe on the M4 iPad. Going down to options here, display. I'll show you we're at high settings, 60 FPS, and I've got dynamic resolution turned off, so it's not going to bring that resolution down. We're at the native iPad resolution, and it plays just fine. Right now, we can only go up to 60 hertz. We can't do 120, but I suspect that, in the future, given that we've got these more powerful chips here, the developers can enable something like that. And this really isn't a watered-down version of Warframe. It supports cross-play, so people who are on PC and I think PSN, Xbox can also play with you here, even though you're playing on a mobile tablet. And the final thing I wanted to show off here was some emulation using PPSSPP from the App Store. We only have access to OpenGL, and even on the iPhone 15 Pro, going up to 10x resolution doesn't work out very well with a lot of games, but I'm going to take it all the way up here. First game we've got is Tekken 6. Up in the top left-hand corner, we've got our FPS counter that's built into PPSSPP, and we're over 4K. This is overkill, but I just wanted to show you that it would work. And you can even run Chains of Olympus at 10x on this device. And as soon as we get like Vulkan or Metal support with this, it will work a lot better on other devices with these higher resolutions. But it's pretty great to see this working with OpenGL right now. And as soon as we get some more emulator developers coming over, like I'm hoping for the Dolphin emulator to hit the iOS store, it'll be really easy for everybody to install that. Right now, you do need to sideload it or jailbreak your device. You could also use Alt Store, but I'm really hoping they bring it over to the App Store for sure. So in the end, yeah, the iPad Pro M4 is definitely a powerful device. It's a great gaming tablet. Is it worth $1,000? No, not at all. It's definitely not. You could spend that money and buy a really awesome gaming laptop, but if you're not into a gaming laptop and you like these iPads, then yeah, I mean, this thing is definitely putting down some really great performance. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. I really appreciate you watching. If you've got any questions or you want to see anything else running on the iPad Pro M4, just let me know in the comments below. And like always, thanks for watching.